Certainly, brands like Steinway and Bechstein are forever associated with the very origins of the piano industry, as well as the innovation of what really a lot of us think of as the modern piano. But few brands have had as large an impact on the modern piano industry as Kawai and Yamaha of Japan. These two complete titans of the music world both began in Japan, and as a lesser known fact to some people, they actually share an origin. Beginning in the early 1900s, Kyoichi Kawai was one of Yamaha's leading engineers responsible for its very first grand piano designs, as well as a lot of the machinery that would power Yamaha's first piano factories. Following the death of Yamaha's patriarch and their subsequent exit out of the family business, Kawai departed and he actually became his own piano company, piano founder in Japan, not that far away in Hamamatsu, and slowly became quite prolific within Japan himself. The onset of World War II and its horrific and fairly definitive conclusion for Japan was obviously devastating for both companies, and it would be over a decade before the companies were back to full steam. Yamaha and Kawai became both focused on consistent and efficient manufacturing processes, and both went through rigorous refinement of their musical designs. And as Japanese manufactured products became more widely accepted in North American markets, very similar to how German products also became accepted again, the two companies were ready with vastly superior products to equally priced domestic instruments from the likes of Baldwin or Heinzmann, Willis & Co., Mason & Reich, there's dozens of more, and they came in and steamrolled the North American market. Dominance of the global piano industry truly arrived in the late 70s and 80s, with more and more conservatories, universities, schools, and homes selecting the Japanese product as high value, low maintenance, and really musically satisfying instruments to play and to learn on. There are many parallels between the two brands' lineups, both in the acoustic as well as the digital realms. We're going to talk about just the acoustic though. Yamaha and Kawai have top-level concert grands, with the CF series being the most recent from Yamaha, and that joins the well-established and pretty beloved Shigeru Kawai line that's been out for a couple of decades from Kawai. Their institutional high-end series are basically machine-made versions of those top series. So it's the S-Type on the Yamaha side and really the GX on the Kawai side are really just factory-built Shigerus. Kawai's GL and Yamaha's CX series are the closest in terms of spec, and obviously it spurs a lot of debate amongst shoppers and dealers whether the CX and the GX are truly parallel in terms of their spec. The upright lines on Kawai's side have thankfully been simplified and streamlined into their current K series more recently, and that matches Yamaha's U series. Historically, Kawai has always had a much more fragmented upright line with more than a dozen different series appearing over the decades, compared with Yamaha's consistent use of the U series. Now, despite the similarities in the lineup and the company history, the musical instruments themselves have quite a few differences. And this is where a lot of the shopping and the research occurs for many mid-range piano shoppers, because these are often the only two or sometimes two amongst a few choices that they boil it down to. One of the most obvious differences is Kawai's use of the Millennium 3 Action in their entire lineup. It's a combination of wood and carbon fiber reinforced action parts, which Kawai claims has several benefits. The maintenance advantage over the wood parts that are more likely to flux in different temperatures and humidity is a pretty obvious one, and anymore it really doesn't spur a lot of debate. The musical benefits are a little more subjective, but Kawai has done measured tests and proven that their action actually does repeat faster, and it seems to be more accurate at lower dynamic ranges. Although many of the harshest criticisms of the Kawai actions have actually historically come from Yamaha dealers, maybe not that surprising, Yamaha has also used synthetic plastics in their action design as well, and that took the form of them replacing their wooden jack with an ABS plastic jack, and that was done through several models over many, many years. Although customers may still hear, let's call it an occasional dog whistle from salespeople suggesting that there is a major quality gap between these two brands because of specifically Kawai's use of synthetic materials, the history of the pianos in the marketplace at this point over the last few decades is completely reliable and one of very, very high quality. This isn't to say that some performers still may prefer the feel of a Yamaha or the feel of a Kawai, but it really is down to a subjective preference of feel rather than any other quality consideration. So along with the action design, there is another difference in key stick length on both the uprights and the grands. Kawais have anywhere between about a 1 to a 3 centimeter longer key stick right across their upright and grand line compared with the similar Yamaha models, which can further increase the repetition speed, and it actually just leads to better control when you're playing further up in the key bed just in front of the fall board. So moving on from action, the second substantial difference between these two brands in their approach to design is the soundboards. It's a less often talked about subject, but I think it's actually really important. I love bringing this up with customers. It's a major contributor, really, to the tonal differences between these instruments. Yamaha uses tapered soundboards in its top two Grand Series. The CF Series and the S Series both have tapered solid spruce soundboards. The Kawai uses tapered spruce soundboards throughout its entire lineup, both uprights and grands, except for its most basic continental uprights like the K15. In certain settings, a non-tapered soundboard is going to have improved tuning stability. So it's not that one is exclusively better than the other, but most players are going to agree that when it comes to improved sustain and better response and a better dynamic range, usually tapered soundboards deliver that more consistently more often. A third difference is the scale design and the string lengths for comparable models. So for example, the Yamaha U1 has a shorter string than the comparable Kawai K300. And we're talking, of course, about the longest #1 bass string. The GB1 Grand from Yamaha is shorter than the Kawai GL10. The C1X is shorter than the G1X, so on and so forth. Yamaha tends to use a higher tension scale design with a shorter string, which actually produces a slightly brighter and a slightly more clear mid-range and treble. So there is a reason why they do this. Whereas the slightly lower tension Kawai with the longer strings with the tapered soundboard gives much more resonant bass, longer sustain, more cabinet resonance in a lot of cases, but perhaps slightly less mid-range projection. And this leads to a fourth and probably the most widespread known reputational difference between the two brands, which is the Yamaha having a bright sound and the Kawai having that dark sound. And for the most part, the reputation still actually has its roots in reality. There is this tonal difference between the two lines. Although Yamaha has started voicing their hammers darker, which means softer, than they traditionally did at the factory, there are still design differences, we've mentioned a few of them here, which innately contribute to that sharper tone. So in a way, you're never really going to get away from the fact that Yamahas will always tend towards a more bright, more mid-range bias, whereas Kawais certainly have kind of this bass and this treble bias. It sounds just a little bit richer, but maybe not quite as punchy. So we hope that you've enjoyed this synopsis of some of the key differences between these two great companies, Yamaha and Kawai, and we wish you the very best with your piano shopping experience. If you've not had a chance to subscribe yet to Miriam Pianos on YouTube, I sincerely encourage you to do so. We're always coming out with helpful videos, or what we hope is helpful videos. And of course, leave us a comment as well. We'd love to know what you thought of the video. Best of luck. We will see you back for more videos shortly.